The Supreme Court is going to hear opening arguments on a case that could eliminate the broad immunity tech companies have enjoyed for decades. This is Common Sense Explains. Gonzalez versus Google will be the first time the highest court will weigh in on Section 230 of the 1996 Communications Decency Act, which essentially protects platforms from being sued over third-party content. Our senior privacy counsel, Jolina Quaresma, filed a brief with the Supreme Court about the case, along with Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen. Joe, I'm excited to talk to you about this case. You are one of the lawyers at the organization that gets to work on a ton of different legislation that Common Sense Media supports, and also cases like these. Can you walk us through what your day-to-day looks like at Common Sense?
Sure. So basically, I work with legislators, regulators, policymakers at the federal and state level. And my goal is always to have in place legislation that keeps our kids safe online.
So we're going to dive into the legal part of this case. But first, can you explain why the Gonzalez family is suing Google to begin with?
Well, the family is suing because their daughter died in a 2015 ISIS terrorist attack in Paris. And they believe that YouTube, which is owned by Google, played a role in it. As many folks know, YouTube has a lot of content on it, including a lot of ISIS videos. And the allegation is that Google's algorithm helped amplify ISIS's message, and it helped recruit and radicalize individuals who played a role in killing their daughter.
So the content that you're talking about, it was hosted on YouTube, which is owned by Google. So why is Google saying then that they are not liable for that content?
Okay, to answer that question, I first have to take us a step back. If I were to post a lie about you on social media, you could sue me for defamation, right? Now, there's this provision, Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, that protects the platform that I posted the lie on. And basically, Google is using Section 230 as a shield in saying, nope, you don't get to sue me for something that ISIS did on my platform.
So as Jolina just explained, this is a very complicated case, in part because Section 230 is a very complicated issue. So before we keep analyzing this case, we need to understand what Section 230 is. Let me explain. Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act is known as the Internet's most important law because it essentially protects websites from lawsuits if a user posts something illegal. It was created in 1996 so website owners could moderate sites without worrying about legal liability. The law created the internet as we know it today and protects social media networks, online marketplaces, news outlets with comment sections, and so many more from getting sued for the content on their platforms. But it's really controversial. Some say Section 230 for the internet is like seatbelts in the auto industry. But critics say that its very broad protections let powerful companies get away with harming its users. And it's time that users start getting the real protections. So Jolina, you know Section 230 better than anyone at the organization. You wrote the brief that was filed with the Supreme Court on behalf of Common Sense Media. What are those main takeaways you hope that the justices got from reading that brief?
We don't file briefs unless we have something to say that no other party is going to bring up in the litigation. And there were really two things that I want the justices to walk away with. Is first, Section 230 is supposed to protect publishers when they are publishing third-party content. Here, Google did way more than that. They collected millions and millions of data points on individuals. And then based on these data points, they do a behavioral profile analysis that is used to determine what other content to give individuals. So they're not just publishing it, they're basically directing traffic to certain videos or certain content. That is not what Section 230 was intended to cover. And the reason why I want to make sure the justices understand this first point brings me to the second point, which is that the harm that is caused by this, it affects children, kids and teens in a way that is particularized to them. They don't have the capacity because their prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed to make rational decisions. In the adult brain, our prefrontal cortex and our limbic system, they work in tandem. That's just not the case with respect to adolescence.
So we know that there's very public bipartisan agreement in replacing Section 230. President Trump tried to rewrite the law more narrowly. President Biden has said he wants it replaced. So why hasn't anything been done up until now?
That's a really great question. Here's the thing. Passing legislation is actually quite difficult. The devil is in the details. So while everyone may agree on the end goal, where people just can't seem to find common ground is in the details. Like, how do we get to that end goal? So if you take, for example, a bill that was introduced last year, the American Data Privacy and Protection Act, there was wide support for having a federal comprehensive law. And yet Congress failed to pass it.
So now it's up to the court to decide what happens with Section 230. If the court votes in favor of the Gonzalez family, what do you think that could mean for major tech companies like Google?
I don't think there's going to be an immediate impact. I think Google is going to have to act like any other corporation out there, in that it's going to have to seriously start assessing its litigation risk. Let's remember here that Section 230 was their way of getting all lawsuits tossed out before cases could be heard on the merits. So for them, they're going to have to decide, how deep are their pockets? Are they going to keep things status quo and then just deal with each lawsuit as it comes? Or are they going to fix their algorithm and minimize their litigation exposure? We don't know. This ruling isn't going to break the internet. They just have to decide what they want to do as a company.
So we are definitely going to be tracking the Gonzalez versus Google case and its implications on all of those platforms that we all use. Thanks so much, Jolena, for walking us through all of that. And we invite you to join our advocacy newsletter to get updates on all of our tech accountability work. That link is in our episode description. Until next time.